The national gender pay gap has grown over the past 6 months, according to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. Women in full-time employment now earn $261 less on average per week than their male counterparts. This means women would have to work until the 31st of August to earn the same annual pay as men. Sally Moyle is an Honorary Associate Professor at the ANU Gender Institute and joins me now. Afternoon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan.
What do you make of this?
Well, look, it's a simple number, but clearly there's a lot of complexity in behind it. I think the suggestion from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency is that the drop of nearly 1 full percentage point in the gender pay gap, to make the gender pay gap wider, is largely as a result of the increase in men's wages, full-time wages, and particularly in the construction industry. And I guess this shows us that the funding that the federal government shoveled into the construction industry and the trades through the first round of COVID has paid off, and it's worked for the men. But unfortunately, we've overlooked the caring professions that women predominate in, the hospitality and the retail sectors that women predominate in, and that we're now seeing with this next round of COVID is really hitting hard, is actually having a real effect on the gender pay gap. It's great that men's wages are growing. We need to see women's wages growing as well. And in our very highly segregated workforce, we need to concentrate on making sure that women's wages are also improved. Now, when we entered the first round of COVID, it was a great realisation that caring work is an essential service for society. We really need it. But since then, we haven't done anything. We haven't done the hard yards to improve the wages of women in the caring professions in particular.
This is going to certainly raise questions about the federal government's gender focus that we heard about last year in the budget, isn't it?
It really is. And of course, we haven't seen anything emerge from that process yet. We're looking with bated breath to see what will happen. The governments of Australia have agreed that they will produce a women's economic security report, task force approach, but we, of course, have yet to see that yet. And I'm really keen to make sure that civil society, academia are included in the conversation so that we can contribute our expertise to the process.
This report, admittedly, has only come out in the last little while. Were there any areas where there have been particular success stories that might lend reason of how things should be done across Australia?
Look, I think where we see employers, private sector employers, paying real attention to pay equity, we do see improvements. So where there are audits done by employers, where they concentrate on delivering pay equity within their own workforces, we do see improvements. But this is not an issue that is being driven by government. We're not seeing leadership by government. And it's an issue that just sort of drops off the agenda too often as well. So we're not seeing the real attention that we need to address this. And I think it's one thing to ask individual employers to make changes in their workforces, but what we need is sector-wide changes, particularly in the caring professions. And we've got a childcare case before the Fair Work Commission at the moment that's probably going to go nowhere if we don't have leadership from the federal government, and so far all we've had from them is silence.
Sally Moyle, what do you see as the solutions here, particularly in those caring industries that you've just touched on? There has been long discussion about increasing the wage, but this is more structural than just that, isn't it?
It's about how we value the work that people do. So, for example, mechanics get a supplement to their wage for having grease under their fingernails, right? Whereas childcare workers who deal with pooey nappies every day get no supplement in recognition of that. The work that women do in caring and in supporting and their empathy that is seen as a natural trait of women is actually a skill that women learn and apply in their work, and it's just not valued, it's not paid for. So I think we do need to have some real structural conversations, and then we need sector-wide approaches with leadership from the federal government. So the only closing of the gap in the caring professions that we've seen over the last decade was when the Gillard Labor government participated in a Fair Work Commission case and actually agreed to supplement the wages of carers. And we've seen that has a real impact over the last 10 years. But now we need it to be expanded beyond that sector and into the caring professions more broadly.
I wonder if you see any correlation either with COVID-19 and the impact that's had across many industries, but also the data we've seen coming out today around the jobless rate.
Yes, look, absolutely. As I say, the pay equity gap number is quite a simple number, but it has a lot of complexities in behind it. So we've got to remember that number only represents full-time workers. So where we've seen through COVID, a lot of workers who are working, at 0 hours, they've been stood down, although they're still attached to their employer, they're not counted in this number. And we know that the sectors that are doing the stepping down are retail, hospitality, some caring work, and a lot of women, female-dominated industries. So there's a lot of women who aren't counted in this number. So in effect, the 14.8% is the best case scenario, because it doesn't include casual workers, it doesn't include full-time workers who are not working any hours at the moment, it doesn't include part-time workers. And we know that if you count all of the incomes of women and men, the gap is closer to 40% than 14. So I think that's a really important thing to remember. So it does include the fact that there's a lot of women who have been trying to juggle the homeschooling of kids, the work and family obligations with everybody at home, and their paid work, who I think have just walked away from the workforce and are now not counted in the numbers of the labour force at all. They're not even counted in the jobless rates.
If on that staggering number of closer to 40%, it's going to take much longer to get to parity, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, this is not something that individual employers or even really the government is solely responsible for, because it reflects the decisions that women and men make about how they run their work and family obligations together. So often women are paid less than men to begin with, and it makes sense for families for the woman to step down and work part-time or not work at all in the paid workforce and devote themselves to providing the care work so that the partner can bring the money in. But these things are really elastic. These decisions that women and men make are influenced by the policy settings that government makes and by the fact that we do have structural pay inequity. So it's a much bigger question than just how much we're paying people. It's about the gender roles that people are being raised with, the decisions that women and men make, sometimes under very constrained circumstances. And we do need to really think about this. If we recognise that women's workforce participation over the last 30 years has really contributed to productivity and the Australian government's outcomes and our economic growth over that time without recession, we really need to encourage women into paid work and to encourage men to participate more fairly in the unpaid care work of their families, so that everybody has a chance to do a work and care balance.
Yeah, and alarmingly, this is not even looking at the cascading effect into superannuation over time as well. But before I let you go, I just wanted to find out about this Equal Pay Day.
Yeah. So Equal Pay Day is a calculation that the Workplace Gender Equality Agency does on the basis of the average weekly earnings data that just came out today. And what they do is they calculate the gender pay gap on the basis of annual, weekly, full-time, ordinary time earnings, so full-time men and full-time women. What's the gap, and how many days does that mean that women have to work on top of the financial year compared to men to make the same amount of money as men do? And in this case, in this year, it's the 31st of August. That's 61 extra days a year that full-time women need to work in order to achieve the same income as men do. So it changes every year. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and sometimes it goes up because men are doing better than women. Sometimes it goes down because men's incomes has decreased rather than women's increasing. So, as I say, it's quite complex. But this year, it's 61 extra days that women need to work on top of last financial year in order to make the same amount of money that men do, full-time earnings.
That's really, really challenging. Sally Moyle, thank you so much. Great to have you along, Honorary Associate Professor at the ANU Gender Institute. Do appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dan.